Hi, Charles. Nice to see you. Nice to be here today, and we have a great topic lined up, carbon neutrality 101. So we're just starting on this very complex topic, but it is, as you know, one of the buzzwords in sustainability. So, and it is a complex topic. So we're going to try and figure out what the main issues are here and what it means actually when you're producing goods that obviously emit something, and carbon among other things, and how you can compensate for it, annul it, reduce it. Well, we're going to look into that together with my panelists. So let's start right away, and I will ask each of the speakers to introduce themselves briefly and their company. Can we start with Caroline at Lenzing?
Thank you, Sophie. Welcome also from my side. My name is Caroline Ledl. I work at Lenzing Group in the textile business as the head of our product management team. We are a company producing wood-based fibers out of our headquarters in Austria with production sites globally. And we have also a lot of experience on this topic. I will discuss a little bit further in our panel, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Caroline. Rüdiger, can you please introduce yourself, even if we know you well?
Thank you, Sophie, and thanks, Charles, for all your credits. Exaggerated as usual. Yeah, my name is Rüdiger Fox. I'm the CEO and Chief Environmental Activist of Sympatex. We are working on the climate issue intensively since 5 years, and love to contribute if we can to that discussion.
Andrea Crespi, can you please introduce yourself and your company?
Hi, Sophie. Good afternoon to everybody. Andrea Crespi, Managing Director, Eurojersey, Italian-based company producing warp knit fabric. In details, we basically have a branded production called Sensitive Fabrics, which is a fabric that go in different business from ready to wear to outwear and whatever. Fully integrated production, 100% made in Italy. Against we basically, the majority of the investment we did it in our country, in Italy, where we focus basically all the investment. What concerning our vision in terms of sustainability, which we'll discuss it later, we started in 2007 with a project which at the moment it's bringing on the industry a couple of results.
Very good, thank you. Jan from ClimatePartner.
Yes, thank you very much. Happy to be here today. My name is Jan. I'm head of key account management at ClimatePartner, and we are a solution provider for climate action. So if companies want to become more climate friendly, want to take climate action, and even bring carbon neutral products to the market, we are there to support and bring this topic on the agenda.
Well, can we start with you then, Jan? Can you briefly try and explain in easy to understand terms what it means to be climate neutral when one is producing goods and using goods to manufacture clothing? Let's put it that way.
Yes, sure. So what we're doing, or what we try to help companies to do, is really to get a view on their carbon footprint. So in a first step, we help companies measure their carbon footprint, be it on corporate level, but then in the next step also on product level, so that you can make an informed decision about your carbon footprint. So this is what we're doing with the software, together with consultants that really dig into also your supply chain, and we combine primary data from your supply chain, secondary data from scientific databases, to combine this to really say, hey, my product has X amount of emissions. And from that starting point, you can say, what is there to reduce? What emissions can I avoid? What can be done quickly? Where do I need to rely on my supply chain? What do I have in my own hands? So really build on a strategy, a reduction path. But this will not be enough, as the topic climate change is so urgent. We cannot wait until 20, 30, 40 years until we can produce a product CO2 free. That's why carbon offset projects play a vital role in the whole transparent communication about it. So we take our customers on a journey to really say, measure your footprint, work on your carbon footprint, support carbon offset project, and then transparently communicate what you're doing. And that's how we are helping our customers.
Just one more question here, because when we're talking about a carbon footprint, are we only talking about carbon emissions, and is that only linked to energy? Or do you also bring in carbon equivalent things? Can you clear that up for us?
Yes, it's maybe an important question for us. It's for me, it's normal to talk about carbon, but meaning CO2 equivalent. So when we look into a carbon footprint, all greenhouse gases are considered and they're converted into the CO2 equivalent. So when we talk about the carbon footprint, it means carbon equivalent footprint. So all greenhouse gases are considered.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Caroline, Lenzing is one of the few companies that I know of to actually market a fiber that is carbon neutral or net zero. I can't remember carbon zero. I can't remember what it's named. So how did you go about doing that? Is there anything in the production of the fiber itself that makes it carbon neutral, or is it paired with a compensation scheme to make it zero emissions?
I think it's very easy for me to use also what Jan has said before. So basically, our marketed carbon zero tensile fiber, which is a carbon neutral product, is doing different things in order to have this carbon neutral footprint, or footprint might be the wrong word there, but the carbon footprint, carbon neutral impact. So basically, where we start from is we have, as a company, also a very clear strategy in reducing our carbon emissions or CO2 equivalent. And for those fibers, we also have a reduced footprint by especially reducing our carbon emissions, which we do via different projects or different measures like using renewable electricity and using renewable energy. And then what we also do is we engage with our suppliers specifically to also look at their footprint and how we can reduce together, especially our so-called scope 3. And then at the end, for those products, we still have a footprint. So we still emit carbon. And this is where then these offset projects come into place, where we offset the unavoidable emissions in order to have a carbon neutral product. But our strategy is very clearly to further reduce the footprint in order to use less and less offsets from year to year.
Right, I understand. Let's move on to what Eurojersey is doing. Andrea mentioned that since 2007, there's been a company-wide measures taken to reduce, I think, all of your impacts. So can you walk us through what Eurojersey has been doing and what progress you've made and how that contributes to more sustainable products?
Yes, ecco, maybe if I may look a little bit cuckoo, but I would like to step a little bit away from what we did at the Eurojersey, because I'm not here to promote what we do. What we do, it can be seen, it's fact, you can look at our footprint report and understanding what we did. But I think that I just wanted to start from if I can, please feel free to stop me, from a little bit different angle.
Okay, go ahead.
Today, these things about sustainability is becoming an incredible marketing tool. I mean, we all became very green. We all talk about how sustainable our products, how beautiful we are. We go to the fashion show, we paint our stand out of green, we make compensation. But I think that, and this is also part of our vision, and what we did is measure it. And the first gentleman that was talking, he said something very important: measure. If we don't measure, it's marketing. First of all, we have to measure. Once we measure, we understand where we are. And when we understand where we are, we can understand what to do to make it better. I'm not a fan of compensation. If I have €1 million, we invested 75 million in 10 years. I prefer to invest in, before to think about compensation, how can I do it better? How can I do it with less resource? And how can I make a product that lasts longer? The problem of fashion at the moment, that everybody is claiming that we have a massive impact on in terms of environmental impact on the world, but maybe we better ask why. Because of fast fashion, because of products that are not lasting very long. Maybe we have to think, how can we do it better? Product that lasts longer with less resource. And probably we have also to the brands. Us as a consumer, the first key things is consume less, buy less, and buy better. I think that this is something that we have to enter this little or big world to understand what can be done. In terms of measure, we adapt basically what Europe gave us, which is the PEF, Product Environmental Footprint, which at the moment is the, let's say, recommendation in Europe and is the only, let's say, official tools available to measure the impact. We simply decided to adapt it. We step away from recycle, from bio, from whatever, and saying, okay, we measure, we understand where we are, we declare. We've been a company which is not saying that we're green, but we are declaring what is the footprint, and of course, fixing a target, measuring it to how to improve it. This is a little bit our, let's say, journey, which started in 2007. And today we understood that the road is much more longer compared to what we thought a couple of years ago.
Okay, thank you. I'll get back to you, but I want Rüdiger to tell us what measures Sympatex has taken to reduce its impacts, and how do you measure it or monitor your emissions and impacts?
I probably start with one remark, slightly contradicting what you said at the very beginning. I think the carbon question is probably one of the simplest challenges we have in environmental terms.
Oh, yeah?
Simple because it's kind of a balance sheet issue. We put CO2 out, the atmosphere is mixing it up. If we do compensation, we pull something from the atmosphere. So it's a pretty net zero game we first need to achieve. While I agree with Andrea, in long term, we want to run Jan out of business, because compensation can only be a sort of a transitory technology where we can win time, but not solve the problem. But I think the simplicity of carbon in the balance sheet is much easier to see or to understand than if we go in chemicals and say we give out chemicals and we put it out and extract it again. So I think carbon is the perfect example where we can train ourselves to go in all aspects, and Andrea mentioned it in the path. There are 16 factors at least recognized. So let's start with carbon. If we manage carbon, we can gradually go into more complicated issues.
Interesting.
We started about 5 years ago to really analyze all our products. So we actually monitor it and show it to the clients, the CO2 impact throughout scope 1, 2, 3. That means fully integrated into the supply chain. The insights, I think that's kind of common knowledge by now, that about 80% happens actually in the supply chain.
Right.
And so yes, we changed to electrical cars, we changed our server structure to save energy, but that's peanuts. I think key is, first of all, to identify where the big impacts in the system, and for our industry, that's definitively in the dyeing and finishing process. So we are working on different technologies in the dyeing and finishing project. We go into the raw materials, and we just achieved at least over 25% of bio-based waste regeneration into membrane materials. So we try to cover the range, but at the same time, actually, we went from day one into compensation schemes, because I believe that it will help us winning the time, and at least in the atmospheric mixture, we kind of try to achieve the neutral balance sheets.
Tell me, Jan, do you agree with Rüdiger that carbon is maybe one of the easier elements and just to learn as a learning process or not? And do you think it's a good place to start?
Yes, and I also agree with Rüdiger. I will be happy to run out of business and then work on different topic. If we say, okay, we tackled and have climate change under control, but unfortunately, will probably will take a long time. But what I do see, it is really easy to start, and then it gets, let's say, complex on the way, but that's okay. What I really need to say is that you need to put this topic on the agenda. Start, make a carbon footprint, and don't try to, have already all of your suppliers and all of your supply chain and a holistic view in it already. This is maybe in year 2, 3, or 4. So therefore, to have a first carbon footprint, it's not complicated, especially if you're working with us with a certain experience in this area. Then you have this topic on your agenda, and then you can dig deeper into it, and then it becomes again easier because more people, internally and externally, challenge you. Your thinking within the company becomes more about this topic, carbon, and you have more and better information ready. So yes, the starting is easier, then it gets a bit complex, but then it gets easier again because more people within the company and also your suppliers are talking about the topic, and you get more and more information, can make more and more and better decisions.
Um, so one of the issues with being sustainable that Andrea mentioned is that there's a lot of talk, but then you have to prove what you're doing and measure it. How, Andrea, I guess all three of you, Caroline and Rüdiger, what is the discussion with your customers with regards to reducing the impact of the entire fashion industry and the textile industry? How much does that count? And how do you share information, data, or measures with your customers?
Can I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Our experience, and I hope that the experience of my colleague is going to be a little bit better. I mean, I don't have very good news. Because I think that at the moment, the majority of our customer, which some of them are very high-end standing and thinking, but realistic, is that the majority of our customer, all they needed is, can we claim that it's bio?
Yeah.
Can we say that it's recycled? Can we put a label that say that it's green? That's not sustainability. That's we are not even started on that. That's my opinion. I think that 4.0 thinking is somebody that come to your company and say, you know what, I need to understand what are these 16 indicators of the PF or whatsoever, because I need it not as an output to say that I'm good, but to understand and then to grade and to rank what's the input, the impact of the garments. I think that at the moment everybody, and especially the brand, which are very scared, they prefer to put an anchor saying that's bio, that is recycled, that is biologic, this is whatsoever. Instead of being far more deep thinking and saying, okay, let's start from declaring and let somebody else saying that if we are sustainable or not. I think this is a big missing. And I have to say that, but this is the bad news. The good news is that the job that we did in measuring and sharing with our stakeholders all the data, which, to be honest, for the last 5-6 years, they come back to us and say, yeah, but excuse me, do you have the label that I can put it that is coming with the net? I said, hold 1 second, maybe it's a little bit deeper. This is all hand up. It's now basically in the last, let's say, 6 months, it's happened what it did not happen in the last 5. I think that we are moving from greenwashing, which is the 90% of the case, to my opinion, on the industry is greenwashing, to something that has a bit more common sense, because the meaning that people understanding that sustainability is not what you do. I don't care if you have a fabric made out of the best cotton on earth. But then if you dye it or to print it, you use the worst chemical of 3 times the water. Where is the sustainability? That's greenwashing. Quindi sustainability is the fundamental and what the industry has to understand, that sustainability is not what you do, but is how you do things, and how has to be measured. If we don't start from this paradigm, then I think we don't go anywhere. That's my point of view.
Thank you for that.
May I add a little bit of optimism to that, Andrea or Sophie?
You should. I'm challenging to be more optimistic.
Go ahead.
Here you go. Here you go.
Everything is perfect.
Yeah, let's zoom out for a second. Let's zoom out. I joined this fantastic industry only 5 years ago, sometimes mid of 2016, coming from totally different backgrounds. We started end of 16 to really analyze our entire portfolio on CO2 emissions. When we posted this or presented this at ISPO 2017, I'm not sure if everybody was laughing at us, ignoring us, or didn't understand where we're coming from, but nobody was interested. 2018, only 2 years later, the UN brought this topic on mainstream, jointly with Ellen MacArthur Foundation, some studies. In 5 to 6 months, we were sitting around the table in the UN headquarters, drafted a charter which has teeth. We presented it in COP24 at the end of the year. By end of last year, more than 100 brands have signed. If we look at this change speed from ignorance through at least commitment to action, I would see greenwashing rather a great symptom of awareness than a threat. Because I think more and more people understood now. It's in the boardrooms now. And from the boardrooms, of course, everybody goes in actionism first. But I think we have, at least on the carbon topic, we have now a framework. And if you look at the French government being impatient with the European Commission and has decided that by mid of next year, we will have a labeling on all garments, at least recognizing the CO2 footprint, this is revolutionary. And if we really look at this trajectory, as I said, I think it's pretty easy. I think there are more challenges to come, especially when we mix up different factors and need to trade off water consumption with carbon or whatsoever. But I think what is fantastic, if you look at this time horizon, it took us less than about 1 garment collection development time period to come from ignorance to action. If we see this, I don't see any other industry who has switched so fast. And I think climate will be the role model where our industry can really transform. I see it coming now for chemistries. I see it coming at the end of the day for circularity, but the change speed is amazing. And I don't think it will take more than 2 or 3 years that we really go into action. And as I said, it might be transitory, partially by compensation. I see the action to really change is what we need. But I would see once, and I think that is probably the other positive effect about it. It's at the moment the only common damage that is priced. If you pollute water, if you pollute chemistry, nothing happens to your balance sheet. But since 2 or 3 years, more and more governments actually price CO2 emissions. So we can actually, it's the first sustainability action that actually works in controlling. So I think that's a fantastic part. It is really the exemplary case where I would say in 2 or 3 years, a fundamental shift has happened that cannot be reversed anymore. But it will leave out some people who don't understand that they need to go into action. I agree with you, Andrea, there's a lot of greenwashing around. But if we take that one, if we can manage this one, I think we can manage the rest.
I fully agree.
Yeah, maybe I can also add a little bit of optimism here, because when Rüdiger talks about the commitments that are done and also the action that the brands and other companies are setting, I think this is really something we see also with our customers now. And the questions we receive as a company and as a raw material supplier, they get more and more. And we see this as a positive sign, because people get more aware of this topic and also ask more questions because they want to have the data, they want to understand further and really make a change. Yeah. So, for example, for us, when we look at our fibers, we have not only a carbon footprint calculation for them, but an overall LCA, and we also share this data, and we share it also publicly via HIC MSI, so that people can see it and can use it also, because I think that's important to be also that open and transparent, and also to share your commitments as a company yourself. For example, for us at Lenzing, this is our commitment to Science-Based Targets initiative, where I see a lot of other textile companies now really committing to this as well. And that's a very important step, because there it's not about greenwashing anymore. There it's really about providing data, providing your calculations, as well as showing a way how you're going to reduce your emissions as a company overall and how you want to achieve this. And we see this with Science-Based Targets Initiative, but with the UN Fashion Pact as well, where more and more people in the textile industry are jumping onto that and really see the need for change. But I also have to say, I can understand why we're a little bit maybe at a stage where it gets more complicated for people, because looking especially at brands and retail, for them, most of their emissions come from their suppliers. So for them, it's really an overwhelming topic. So this is why, as a supplier and part of their supply chain, we're very happy to not only contributing, to calculation of footprints, but also I think, and that is important for everyone on the panel, being a bit the spokesperson for the topic and educating others in the industry, and educating either our own suppliers or our own customers.
Caroline, this is a topic. I'm sorry if I cut you off. This is a topic I wanted to cover today with you. Is you're just a cog in the wheel. You're the supplier of the raw material. And so, say, to connect with what Andrea was saying earlier, what if I buy some what's it called? Carbon zero tencel, and then, make some sort of useless product or dye it in a way that's not clean? I mean, do you accompany the buyer in explaining how it should be used? Do you follow through? Because you may be selling a carbon neutral fiber, but I'm selling garments and they may not be carbon neutral. And then I want Jan to come in to talk about that. But
Yeah.
how do you manage that as a company and as a supplier?
Yeah, the textile value chain is quite broad and also quite long. So this definitely is a question we're also asked. On the first topic, I want to mention also is Lenzing and this Tencel brand. And we only make claims about our fibers. So we also ask people not to talk about the garment if it's not carbon neutral, but mention the raw material. But we work also with our own customers. So when we started selling this product, so carbon zero Tencel, and we get asked by our customers, like spinners or fabric mills, also what can they do and how can they further go on with our approach. So this is a little bit where this education comes in, I would say. On the one hand, where our colleagues from the sustainability department explain a little bit about how do you measure carbon footprint, who could help you with that, what are steps where they can reduce, and also how then to work with offsets. And this is what our team then is also doing. We try to go further, again, one step, and then discuss this also with different partners in the value chain. Where can they source maybe materials that are better or have a lower impact, just because those mills work not only with our fibers, but have less impacts themselves.
Yeah, and how does that work? Because if I'm a supplier of one material in the supply chain, I can only guarantee what I am making. What happens when that raw material is changed, altered, combined with others? and gets to the market and reaches the consumer?
Yes, so what we're doing when we calculate the carbon footprint of a product, we are modeling along the supply chain, really from the raw material through this all steps in the manufacturing process, all the way to sewing and then bringing this product into the market. And we can use primary and secondary data. So this is very important that in the future we have more and more primary data from all kinds of companies along the supply chain, so that we know who makes the fiber, who's sewing, who's manufacturing, and where you have a blind spot as a company, we can use secondary data from scientific databases. And this is what we are doing. And your job also as a manufacturer is to bring this into your supply chain. Say, in the first step, hey, I need information about your carbon footprint of the product. We're helping there. And then like that, of course, it's very complex and it's not something that is done within 1 year, but then it helps you to make a better and informed decision. And we have great examples there where you say, as a company, you're bringing maybe your product carbon neutral to the market, but you're never satisfied with the status quo and say, okay, I've calculated the carbon footprint based on secondary data and supported a fantastic carbon offset project, but that is not the goal for the future. That's just an intermediate solution. And we see it with also customers from Sympatex, where they made an informed decision and said, okay, I'm really going for this membrane because it has a low carbon footprint than another one, and therefore my product becomes more climate friendly. And then this argument with just compensating or greenwashing, it's okay, but I don't know any company that says, oh, I love to do greenwashing. And therefore, it's very important that we also accept what companies do at the moment and then challenge the status quo to have a better future. And therefore, yes, it is maybe not the perfect world, but it's a step where we need to accept everything. But and that's also very important. It's never the solution to compensate your carbon footprint. It's always just the second best, and we need to work on the future.
Well, this is, the issue will be coming up. I mean, it's a slow process, but there are a few brands that do post the carbon footprint of their products. So, Allbirds is the most well known, and that's been, it's a bit controversial actually, but there are smaller brands that try and do that. What do you do as a consumer? How do you understand that carbon equivalent number? Knowing that today you can't compare products from different brands. So what do you suggest, how do you suggest we proceed with this metric, if we start with just this one that we're talking about today?
For us, it's very important that you bring transparency into the whole process. That you're not only stating, for example, that you're carbon neutral, but that when you're an interested consumer, that you can look into how many emissions you cured, that maybe what carbon offset project was supported, but also what steps are taken to bring down the carbon footprint. And this is very important, and that's how we want to created a labeling for carbon neutrality to say, hey, we want to transparently display what is going on, what are the emissions, but on the other hand, also give the possibility to say, what are we doing as a company, and then also what project are we supporting, and to bring into this transparency is great and very important for consumers to really make an informed decision.
Does anyone else want to react to that? If tomorrow we see products with a carbon emission number on the tag, what does that mean, or what do we do?
If I may, Sophie, just to add on this a little bit. I mean, I think there are different stages, and consumer choices might be one impact. What we need to be careful is that we always go back into consumer choices as an excuse not to start in the first place. I had a discussion a couple of years ago when everybody's saying, why are you starting with radical sustainability if no consumer wants it? Or no consumer understands it, would be then the next excuse. And Andrea said it, the path is to start trying to actually aggregate a set of 16 different factors into one formula, which is a real challenge, and we'll have a huge discussion. I think, first of all, my grandmother tended to say, first clean up your own stuff and then discuss with others. I think that needs to be a company strategy across everybody and the entire industry. We have a mess. I mean, we are probably, and not only by reputation, if you come like me from the outside, you are shocked first. We create collateral damages in countries where we completely ignore the consequences for many years, like no other industry I ever came across. So first of all, we have a huge task and we shouldn't wait until the consumer understands. There are initiatives. French government will enforce it starting mid of next year. The EU countries will follow pretty soon, I guess, with more complex approaches, CO2 being only one of them. But that's not the only one. I think the next step we need to understand, this is about continuous improvement. This is about really doing step by step and doing things with all the side effects of boomerang effects. I mean, we will see the moment you have garments with a low CO2 footprint, people might be reluctant to buy 2 of them instead of 1 because they can get 2 at the same CO2 price. So there are social changes we need mentally. I think still the biggest hurdle is in the heads of our industry because we created that dinosaur. Now we need to kind of domesticate it or actually get it smaller. And I think the big challenge is some of the mindsets, because take colorization, which is one of the most impactful CO2 footprint. If you take Sympatex, if we would colorize the granulate before we turn it into yarn, it's a no-brainer. The CO2 improvement would be massive. What we need to change is decide a few months earlier what color we bring into the market. So that is a switch we need. We need to understand that choosing or excluding certain materials is not a constraint to design freedom, but it's actually an accelerator for innovation because we channel creativity. But this is mental models we have learned for years and years. And I think that's a fundamental we need to have a discussion. Design freedom needs to be constrained in order to accelerate the innovation process and not to constrain the designers in their creativity. But there are limits we need to recognize.
Sometimes constraints are creative catalysts. Andrea, can you react to that with the, that this industry, to what Rüdiger was saying, in that we need to change the rules from the start? And do you see changes happening, especially as you do the dyeing and the printing of your fabrics? So you have control over that stage of the process.
Yes, I think that high-end company, I'm sure, as all the people that are attending this speech, I'm sure that are making a lot to make it better, and everyone approach the problem or the opportunity from different angle. But I think that if you are a factory, you understand that you have to work on the factory to reduce the impact in what you're doing, period. But I think that, and again, I don't want to be the one that always trying to move the balls from one side to the other, but I think that we have to be realistic. I think that the things are to change. I mean, if we look at the way how we are making business since years, the brand is looking the capacity of growing and to make more money. That's it. And we have to be. This is against the concept of sustainability. Point one, we have to understand that sustainability costs, and it's time that we bring more money across the value chain, because it doesn't make any sense that brands running 30-35% of EBIT and then the producer run with maybe 5, 6, 7, 8%. Then we have here companies that make much more money, thanks God, but that's not the normality. Point one, if you don't have the money to invest, you're not able to make better products with less resource. And the other point is where we have to look very carefully is we drive, and the brand drive their business to increase volume, to increase sales. Fashion, that is equal to fast fashion. Fast fashion, is the antithesis of sustainability, because the main concept of sustainability is the capacity to produce product that lasts longer. Fast fashion is against that. I think that starting from the brand, because the consumer is much more ready than what we think. It's the problem that we hide it for too much long information. And I think that what we have to look at is, as I said before, which I mean, I'm running a business, and numbers are, it's what a business is. But said that, I think that we have to think how to make less and better. These are one of the fundamental things to go and to look for something different. Point one. Point two, I think that the management, all the manager in a company, starting from the CEO going down, we have to think to change also the way of the remuneration. At the moment, CEO and all the managers are remunerated based on the capacity of growing a business and how much money the business is making. Maybe we have to put that the 30% of the salary of a CEO going down should be based on profit, and then the other 3 points, ESG, environmental, social, and governance. The minute that managers, CEO are going to start to work with this mentality, then I'm sure, starting from the brands, we can have a better world. That's for
Interesting point. Yeah. Yep. Well, yeah. I think we have a panel of speakers of companies that are doing their diligence seriously, or right? Caroline, do you want to react?
Yeah, maybe I want to react a little bit of as a publicly traded company. For us, for example, the whole topic of ESG is very, very important. It gets more and more important. ESG ratings are highly influential. Just looking at the stock markets, but also a lot of investors. So for us and also for our CEO and CCO, so really for our board of management, these topics become more and more important. And I think that's then also reflected in a way what kind of commitments you have and what you also need to do as action. So I agree with Andrea that this is very important to have a little bit of a change of mindset there to stronger look at these topics. Yeah.
Sophie, if I may add just one remark on Andreas and you, Caroline. I think the beauty on climate question is that we make it financially burdened. A ton of CO2 costs 30 euros, dollars, you name it. Raise it up to 100, perhaps 150 in the next couple of years. That makes a business case. And I personally believe those changes will happen much faster than changing mental models and belief systems. That can go along, and then we gradually need to look at the other things. But that's why I said at the beginning, I think that's the easiest question we have in front of us. So let's tackle this fast. But we need to recognize we did the first fundamental step, that we made it actually financially a calculation point in our balance sheets.
Right. Jan, do you want to comment on the fact that carbon, if you have to pay for it, then it'll go faster to reduce those emissions?
Yes, definitely. And I think at the moment the price for carbon offset project is way too low. And like Rüdiger said, when the prices go higher, then you have much more pressure on companies to make change. But maybe to also put a view on this project. Why is it so important that we support these projects and that we don't have in mind when I'm carbon neutral or when I'm offsetting my emissions, that I'm just buying myself free from my sins. We need to see it the other way around. On COP, there was a large discussion: how can we transfer money to countries to invest in climate action in the global south? And this is exactly what we're doing. When you say you're going to be carbon neutral as a company, what are you doing? You're supporting real projects, and these projects are saving carbon or make sure that while we are reducing our carbon footprint, we're not burning down all existing rainforests. And this is really something that is very important. When you're becoming carbon neutral company, you're supporting a project, and this project is really, really important for the future, that we have renewable energy on a global scale and have existing rainforests. And this is something that you do as a company. And this is also a focus that we need to change, not talk about compensation or supporting carbon offset projects, very abstract, but really look into the project and see what you're doing there. And it goes hand in hand with the question, which is not solved: how can we make sure that money is transferred into this region? And this is one fantastic possibility.
Yeah, well, that for me is one of the complicated issues here, because if you tell me that you're planting trees in Salvador or cleaning water somewhere else, or whatever, some sort of project, I'm based in Paris. I have no way to control it. I don't even really know what it means. I'm not quite sure if I would have chosen the same project as someone else. So I think there are a lot of unknowns in the compensation space that could be that could make it feel more compelling, more useful, and more engaging, actually.
Sophie, do you mind if I interrupt?
No,
I don't
no.
want to interrupt, because you have the best panel going today. And if you look at the chat bar, Andrea's got a whole fan club of people who support what he's talking about. I have views as well. I've got a couple of questions, but we're going to drag this to a close in 5 minutes or so. Do you mind if I ask questions to the group?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Andrea, personal question to me. Next performance days, would you like to do an hour-long segment? Because between all four, but headed by Andrea, it's just fascinating information. And I really would like to explore the point that's been brought up already about double counting the carbon, which is a very interesting line of thought, which I hadn't considered. And I think it's very proper. Sophie, if you would do us the honours of running the panel on it, because there are questions coming up about greenwashing, and we know how people like to take the sequestration and it's playing with numbers. But the question which I have especially is around the Higg index's MSR, and the feeling is that it's not that well accepted. Can I ask for further comments? If the Higg is not suitable, what audit method would the panel like to see being used, like to see being popularized?
Yeah, maybe I can start, because I brought it up briefly also. I think all measures and all tools have their benefits, but also their negative sides. I think if people talk about Higg MSI, they're clearly, especially when using materials from renewable sources, we all know the limitations. I think one of the key benefits is the fact that it's comparable between different materials and that a lot of people could access it. I think Andrea mentioned already the European PEF, I think, which is also a very interesting concept, even though they are also already very critical comments about this. I think as an industry, we might not have yet the ideal measurement, especially for carbon footprints and other environmental impacts. But I see that there is a lot of engagement going on. So probably all of this will also improve within the next years.
Caroline, I very much agree with you in that the Higg is the most popularly accepted, it's the most widespread index in use. And whereas we can always make the audit better, we can't always get everyone to engage. And I think a bigger problem, Sophie, another one for your list for the next performance days, are we suffering from too much audit fatigue? We have over 1,000 audits in use in Europe in CSR, which then leads to customer confusion that we can't tell the difference. So they all become, the best is as bad as the worst. But another question I want to throw out, just to close, are carbon offsetting projects objectively evaluated And what about the different quality levels? So this is hinting towards things like LCAs, where not every LCA is comparable to every other LCA. We get to pick and choose what we can do. How important are costs versus tonnage? How much CCS is being used here? So a very controversial question to finish on. Who would like to take it?
Charles, may I add one more question to your panel at the next performance days? The question, do we want to build an industry based on trust or mistrust? I think we have a tendency to mistrust, and that's all this auditing question. I think if we go back and look at what measures we take, whether that's a HIG, which I think is one of the widely spread, we should not go into perfectionism. What we need is tools where we can take reasonable decisions very fast. If we add then transparency to it, we don't need a trillion of different audits. We can gradually, on the way, while we change things, improve the way how we do things and how we do measure them. I think sometimes we have this tendency to look at the perfect measure or the perfect solution, which is not there. So let's just go step by step. As long as we can measure something where we can compare two things in a qualitative way, it's fine. It's a start. And for the compensation, the same.
I think Jan was also hinting at this earlier, because he has the wonderful view of not having a product, but seeing the various systems. So at this rate, Sophie, you're going to have to get all four of them back at the next show to keep it going. But I think that Andrea wanted to add something to that last point.
Yes, please.
Yes. I'm not a super technical, because thanks God I have people in my team that know how the measurement, the IG index perf much better than me. But I personally believe that the IG index, it's good tools, but very superficial. And we need to go deeper. PEF, and I agree with Caroline, is not perfect. But as a new things, nothing is perfect. It's a journey. We have to start, and year by year we can improve it. We has to be more inclusive, has to consider the microplastic, has to consider the biodiversity, has to consider many other things. It's a journey, but it is important to start. It's totally wrong to think about new method or inventing something more. We have too many declarations, certification. We have to cut 90%. PEF, which is not perfect, is at least what Europe told us. And this is what we should adopt. More business, more people coming from different industry, wool, cotton, linen, man-made, has to jump into it and give something to make it a better tools. This, I think, it's a very, very important thing. The worst mistake that the industry could do is invent a new IG index or a NIG index or something else. Signori, it's too much. Less, make more. Simplicity is the most difficult thing. Sometimes we try to complicate things to avoid to take right things on right and floor.
Andrea, we can see why you've got a fan club. Every one of us is nodding their head.
I have a fan club because I'm so bold, and then people say the poor guys that is without hair.
Maybe to add a few words for trust or transparency, this is very important for us. So when you say you're on this path and you're supporting fantastic projects, it's very important that they're certified according to international standards. And there are standards that you can trust, gold standard or VCS standard, and those projects are audited. And the same with your own carbon footprint. Yes, go take action, and then maybe let yourself be challenged, and then be better in the future, and put it on the agenda, but very transparently say what you're doing. On the one hand, when you calculate your carbon footprint or are engaged in these topics, but also when you're supporting projects. And what we try to do as ClimatePartner, bring as much transparency and trust as possible into the whole process.
Jan, that's great. Could I ask now for a closing statement, 30 seconds from each of you, starting with Sophie, more importantly, but could I also ask the panel, there's such an online conversation going on. If you could take a couple of minutes after this panel's over to respond to a few of the comments, I think you're going to see the amount of enthusiasm and interest in the area that Sophie's uncovered. So Sophie, start with you. Reflections on today's panel.
Oh, well, I think we've just lifted a corner, a tiny piece of a very big picture. And I'm so glad that we had companies that seem to be taking these issues very seriously and not just talking about it. They're walking the walk. And so I have nothing to say personally. I just write, so I'll let them finish, give us some finishing thoughts on this topic of carbon neutrality.
So
Caroline.
If we go to Jan.
No, Caroline?
Or Caroline.
Okay. For me, it was a panel with an extremely broad conversation. So we really covered so many different aspects, not only on carbon neutrality. So we can clearly see how interlinked all these topics are. Which I think will make a lot of conversation also for further panelists and further discussions. So thanks a lot for this great conversation.
Rüdiger?
Yeah, every time I love this topic, I can't hide my passion on it. I think it will be the blueprint of sustainability change in our industry. Especially because we have all the ingredients now. We can measure, we can compensate, and we have financial matters that get into it. We closed the company for a day and joined the Fridays for Future movement a while ago and really asked for massive increase of the CO2 price tag. I think that will be one of the key, because a moral discussion will always take longer than a financial one in our industries. And that's probably just part of the system. So I think once we have solved this one and we recognize the need and the timeline, how to solve it, we can solve the other things right after.
I think you're spot on, Rüdiger. Andrea, how would you sum up today?
How versus what? It's not what we do, it's how we do things that can make a big difference. Thank you.
Brilliant. So, Jan, you're the guy in the middle of this all. What do you think of the panel?
I think it shows that a lot has to be done and a lot has to be informed. But what I really believe is put this topic on the agenda. Don't try to be perfect, but go step by step. Let yourself also be challenged. Don't be afraid to be challenged, because this can lead to then your better product and better ideas in the future. And don't be afraid. It's less complex than you think, at least the first step, and then go from there.
That's most kind.
Great.
Sophie, I presume we can read about these lines of thought being developed in the next edition of World Sports Activewear.
Yes, well, I actually covered it in the issue 3 of 2021 on carbon neutral materials, carbon negative materials, but it's one of many papers.
But I think we're going to revisit it as its popularity has demonstrated.
Certainly,
Can I offer our thanks to you on behalf of everyone here at Performance Day? This panel has been the most popular one, which personally I take as an insult, because my panel I thought was going to be better, but you have top trumped me again. Thank you ever so much for you and all your participants.
Well, thank you for having us. It was great to have this opportunity.
Thank you. Cheers then.
Thank you.
Ciao. Tschüss.